people.
And welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Data on Kubernetes Community Day here in KubeCon EU 2021. Super excited to be kicking this off. This is our first time participating with a co-located event in KubeCon. As you may have noticed in our promotional video, this is the sacred horn that gathered everybody together, that made the call so that May 3rd would be heard. My name is Bart Farrell. I'm very, very excited to be here with you all today. We have an action-packed day with a lot of talks, so I don't want to go too long, but just to give you some introductory info about our community. Our community was started last year in July, and coincidentally, our first speaker was also our first speaker in that inaugural talk that we did. Since then, we've given over 50 meetups. We've done meetups in English, we've done meetups in Spanish, we've done meetups in Portuguese. We did our first meetup in Hindi last week. We have meetups in Cantonese planned that are on the horizon, as well as doing some in Russian. If you speak a different language and want to get involved, just let us know. We're on Slack, we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, we're also on Instagram. We mix art, we mix music, we mix culture. We like to have a lot of fun. It is fantastic to be here with everybody today. We've got a lot of energy and a lot of stuff to do. And speaking of stuff to do, and thinking about geography, all right, because this is KubeCon EU. Coincidentally, I am located in Europe. I'm in a city called Baracaldo in the north of Spain, in the Basque Country. But I'm also joined by someone who's in a different continent, who is our co-chair and visual learning coordinator, who is Nelly Toby. Nelly, can you say hello?
Hi, everyone.
Good. Nelly, what time is it? What time is it where you are right now?
4:01 a.m.
4:01 a.m., right? So up bright and early, got our coffee. Nelly's going to be creating some original art for us today. Also very excited to be launching our Data on Kubernetes coloring book. So pay attention to Twitter, because we're going to be putting out, there will be a different piece of artwork to be drawn on for each one of our speakers. We've got a lot of speakers, so Nelly's been very busy drawing a lot, all right? That being said, pretty much, I just want to get right into this and let Patrick get started with his talk. Like I said, is that you can jump in on our Slack. We got a lot of talks. So like, if we run out of time for whatever reason, we don't have time for questions, you can feel free to leave your questions on YouTube. You can also put your questions in Slack, and we will get to them accordingly that way, all right? But feel free. All of our speakers are nice, wonderful, friendly people. They would be happy to answer all your questions. If they're basic, if they're advanced, it doesn't matter. We insist on being a welcoming community for people of all levels and experiences. So don't worry about that if you are starting out in this Kubernetes world, all right? You are also welcome in the Data on Kubernetes community. We will also have prizes today. We will have a musical performance to finish our day. But that being said, I just want to hand it over to Patrick so he can get started. Really, really exciting, thinking about the distances, the changes that have to be made for someone to go from being a DBA to becoming an SRE. And that's what Patrick's going to be explaining. What are the steps for someone to really get immersed in this world of working with stateful workloads on Kubernetes? So that being said, Patrick, this is our third time having you on. Very, very nice to see you again today. And where are you connecting from?
I'm north of San Francisco in California. Yes, where it's 1 a.m. You don't even have to ask.
Okay, so Patrick burned the midnight oil. And anyway, without further ado, Patrick, you can just tell everybody who you are in case they don't, which they should, because Patrick's kind of a big deal, and then jump right into your presentation.
Yeah, no, not a big deal. Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is Patrick McFadin. I work at DataStax. I've been working with the Apache Cassandra project for quite a long time, and also have been a DBA for a long time, operator. And before I worked at DataStax, I was running infrastructure for a long time. My talk today is going to be about this journey that I could see happening soon, and what it is probably happening right now, which is people going from this role and skill of DBA to SRE. And data on Kubernetes is a very important topic for me. I work on the Cassandra project, which is about running Cassandra in Kubernetes. So it's taking like DBA skills, but then upskilling them into SRE world. So I'm just going to share my screen. And let's see here, let's find it. There it is. And gonna get this going. Let's go. All right, Bart, I'm gonna do the obligatory. Can you see my screen? So you have to unmute yourself.
I can very much see your screen, and it looks gorgeous. Almost as much as your background does with Patrick's perfect lighting.
Yeah, Bart's giving me a hard time about my lighting because I re-rigged my office. Now I have professional studio lighting, and I need to work on it a little more because I'm seeing some shadows. But never mind. This is kind of like a pandemic thing, right? It's like everyone's working on their lighting and camera. So, like I mentioned, my name is Patrick McFadin, and so I'm talking to the database administrators out there. You know who you are, and I think that this has been an important part of infrastructure for a very long time. Actually, probably one of the oldest infrastructure skills, if you think about it, because centralized infrastructure, like mainframes, really started with a database being run centrally. When IBM was first building mainframes in the 1960s, the first big application that they had was a database. And fun fact, the first database ever built was Sabre, and it was to help American Airlines get their data online for basically finding people, getting people on a plane in an organized fashion. And IBM was trying to solve a problem with airline booking, and they invented the database to make that work. And it was a room-sized computer, of course, but it took a lot of database administrators to make that work. And today I'm talking to you, and I would love to give you some information to help you along your way. Now, like I said, I've spent quite a few years as an Oracle DBA, and it was a good skill. Now, I have that Oracle. Many of you may notice what that is. That's a Sun 450. That's right. If you were an Oracle DBA, you probably knew a lot about Sun as well. And those were glorious machines. I loved those things. And that was one actually the fun part of the job was doing the hardware, going through these complicated installs, making sure tuning it, and being on the cutting edge of some really important stuff. Because I think at the time that when I was doing this from from the 90s, the first .com boom, and later, is the database was still a really super important part of infrastructure. And I eventually started working with MySQL along with Oracle. And then as things started getting out of control and we were starting to scale our applications way faster than we could our databases, I eventually started working with Apache Cassandra about 10 or 11 years ago and have not stopped since then. But in each one of these cases, I can say that I pretty much have been administering databases for most of my career. And whether, if it's standard relational database all the way up to NoSQL, I've seen it all, but it's been really fun. I can't say it hasn't been, but here's some things that we should look at. Let's just have some real talk. Times are a-changing, and I'm not here to make anyone freak out, but I want to help you understand what is going on in the industry right now, because the industry right now is, I'm sure you're participating in KubeCon. That's how you got into Data on Kubernetes Community Day. And so, cloud native technologies are definitely taking a huge front seat in this train, this crazy train that we're all on. But I took some, so I worked with one of our analysts at DataStax, her name was Corey, and we looked at some of the data that's in LinkedIn. And here's the first thing that made me a little sad, like the DBA job growth. This is the job title, just as the title. The job growth is down 0.7%. So this is a shrinking field right now. And I think many of you may know that already. That's the job title. So getting a job as the database administrator. But from the skill, and I want to just disambiguate the thing between the title and the skill. The title is shrinking. However, there's still some reasonable growth here for the database administration skill. And of course, because it's not like we stopped using databases and companies don't need data anymore. It's just that there's just been a shrinking in the title. Now, along that, the SRE title has been picking up, reasonable growth as well. And when we talk about site reliability engineering, that is what SRE is, of course, if you didn't know. But site reliability engineering title, like someone that is the title, then where they work, that growth has been 14%. So it's a nicely growing field. Here's the really interesting number. The site reliability engineering skill growth has grown year over year 74%. And this is in any definition, this is a very hot thing. It's moving quickly. And of course, this is looking at skill, it's not the title. And that means that it's as people are, and that's the great thing about LinkedIn. Don't look at job titles because job titles, you can type in anything you want. But if you want to look at more what's happening in the industry, looking at skills is really important. You could be the chief clown officer and still have an SRE skill. And chief clown officer is a thing. But the site reliability engineering skill seeing a 74% growth is pretty indicative. So what is driving that right now? Well, it's part of the reason you're here. Kubernetes is really taking off. I mean, like a rocket ship, and it's not going to slow down. This is when I talk to users and companies all the time that are going through these digital transformation or just modernizing all their infrastructure, moving to the cloud. Moving to the cloud now also means we're going to be implementing our infrastructure with Kubernetes. And when you see all that movement, you know that there's also some efficiencies they're trying to gain. And the move to Kubernetes is definitely happening because it makes a lot more sense whenever you come to running infrastructure. But one of the things that's been really tough is this whole data portion. This is data on Kubernetes has not been something that putting a database in Kubernetes or even database in a container has been a little bit of a taboo subject. But that's changing really quickly. And as witnessed by the fact that we have an entire day at KubeCon now. And it's going to only keep going up. It's a rocket ship and it's going to take off. So this is a world that we live in now where we're going from this specialization to generalization. And specialization, and what I mean by that is I ran infrastructure for a number of years, and I was a director of engineering in another company. And I remember having teams like the network engineering team. These are for our data centers. We had our network engineering team. We had a security team. We had a database administration team. I had a few people that did nothing but work on Linux kernel. There's tons of specialization there. And whenever we would deploy any new application into a data center, of course, what you would do is you would get together all the different teams and have them coordinate. If you can imagine, that is, and I'm sure many of you are like, of course, that's the way we did things. But now generalization is the key. When you're deploying a new application, say in the cloud, you rarely have that many specializations working on just one focused thing. We don't worry so much about having a network team for the cloud because networking is just built in as a part of the cloud. And same with things like security. Well, yes, having security practices is important, but that's not everybody's job. And you may have a CISO, but when someone's deploying applications, they need to have that generalizable skill of being able to make sure that it's secure because that's everybody's job. So database administration is going the same route, which is that we have a group that was just doing database administration is being far more generalized now with the move to cloud and cloud native technologies and Kubernetes. So let's get into what we need to do to make the move. Building your skills, really important part of this because you do have some really, really important skills. So I found this, Red Hat had a great article about what is an SRE. And this is a lot of words, but I really liked how succinct this one sentence is. Now we're going to break this down. We're going to take it apart. But This is a good description of what an SRE is or does and what they're responsible for. And this is the skill. So I took out some keywords. Let's do some keywording here. These words, if you're a database administrator, these words have always been in your vocabulary. Availability, latency, change management, emergency response, capacity management. I think as a DBA, that's probably one of the things you do more than anything else is work on capacity management. Am I going to have enough for whenever the thing that I need that's coming is going to happen? If we're building a new application, am I building enough database to make that happen? And so capacity management, feeds into other things like availability and latency. Because if you run out of capacity, you don't have any more availability and the latency goes down. And then you're involved in change management because it's an emergency response. See how I put all that together for you? But that's the world you've been living in. And those are really, really important skills. You don't need to learn any more about that. And that's great because that's actually one of the most important parts of the SRE job in a skill is managing this at scale and understanding this. But there's a little twist to this. It's not just a database because you have been used to this world. And I think this is where you have a specific and a really important skill set. As we're building out applications, things that are deployed on the web and mobile, microservices, IoT, every application you could think of one application that doesn't use this, a database. You're already used to being in the center of this, and being in the center of this can be pretty painful because that means that anytime there's something that goes wrong, you get involved. But you understand that the criticality of the data, you understand criticality of the infrastructure, you understand the criticality of uptime, all those things. Because if the database isn't working, no one else is working, right? And that's just a really good place to start from. So you've been understanding this database is the MVP. Well, infrastructure that you deploy as an SRE, same story. And what you've been for such a long time is really a resource manager. When I was having fun installing, Oracle on Sun servers, that was a single server. But what I was doing was I was making sure to manage, how do I manage efficiently the single servers worth of CPU, the CPU network and storage. And so that, the compute network and storage of each single server, how do I manage that properly? Well, then eventually I started deploying servers on virtual machines. And again, same story, compute network and storage. How do I manage that properly? And granted, virtual machines gave me a whole lot of different variety, and especially with the Sun virtual machines, but all of that was still resource management. So what's the next thing? What we're talking about Kubernetes quite a bit. What's the next thing? Well, for SREs, it's no longer just a single server. You're now thinking, you have to think much more holistically. And you're doing these virtual data centers. Kubernetes allows you to deploy a virtual data center. And when you're deploying a virtual data center, you're still thinking about those three things, compute, network, and storage, but at the scale of a virtual data center and the application that needs to run inside of it. So you already have a really good a basis for this skill. Compute, network, and storage is really what Kubernetes will be managing for the longest time I could think of. And it's just a fundamental. And if you think about it, whenever you're working with cloud, that's what you get is compute, network, and storage. And that's what you're going to be managing the entire time. So what skills do you need to bring to the table, or what are the new skills you need to have? Well, I'm going to take this other snippet out. And I think this is a good, just a good small piece, responsible for how code is deployed, configured, and monitored. That is the difference. And it's a very big difference because it unlocks a whole different skill set. I'm going to cover a couple of these. First of all, get to know, here's skill number one, get to know how CI/CD pipelines work really well. And what this means is like when developers are writing code, how does it eventually get to the end user? And it isn't magic at all, but it's a very specific process that is hopefully will bring about some quality, but also feedback. And those CI/CD pipelines are super critical. And this is very different than just running a database. This is thinking about things like going from like using Git, understanding the code, like how the builds work, things like Gradle or Make or whatever you're using to make your to do the actual builds. Working with tools like Jenkins and doing unit testing, understanding why unit tests break, and that's again getting to know the code. And integration tests, like how does it work with the rest of the ecosystem that you're building in your application, and finally the staging and then deployment to production. That's that continuous deployment. Really efficient CI/CD pipelines have developers developing code, and when they commit them into Git, that eventually automatically it gets to the end user in a short amount of time and with a high level of quality. There are very efficient companies out there that are doing multiple deploys every single day. As the developers are building new features or fixing bugs, it's getting sent out to users in pretty much real time. It's going through the pipeline and going out. Getting efficient at this is an amazing skill for an SRE, and it is definitely a departure from what you've been doing as a DBA. You may have participated in this as a DBA before, but now this is a really important skill. The other one is observability. This is skill number 2 that I think you really, this is important to work on. And that's not just knowing how to run a dashboard for your database. Yeah, I know dashboards are great, but that's really getting into like the important what you're deploying, like this particular database. Like, oh, this is how many sessions I have running and how many open cursors I have going, that sort of thing. That is not what observability is about. That's one piece of it, but that's not what this is about. Observability in a cloud native deployment is really just looking at the entire stack. And as users are interacting with the front end all the way to the database and the back end, picking out all the parts that happen there and monitoring each individual piece. And there are projects like open tracing, for instance, that are very good about like how do we get from A to B and what's happening in between. Super important, because if you think about like when things go bad, especially in large scale distributed systems, and this is my world with Cassandra, in large scale distributed systems, little things can cause big problems. And so you need to have a very wide view of everything that's happening in your infrastructure. And this is just a really important skill. A lot of observability is not just the particular like the product you're using. Like for instance, if you're using Apollo GraphQL with traffic and Cassandra in the back end, and maybe you're using Pulsar to move data around. Like these are all individual components, and yes, they may emit different things to observe. It's also building it into the code. And that's kind of where things happen. Like open tracing is about that. So this is the thing you need to really work on. It's knowing the code. And when I think about like people moving from DBA to SRE, this is probably the biggest thing you can do is just understand like becoming better at software as it pertains to building applications, but also taking all those skills as a DBA and moving that into a whole nother world of SRE. And I'll tell you right now, we really need you because there is a lot of need for this. And as DBAs, you've really understood the criticality of infrastructure and getting to the point where you can up-level your skills and find that hot growth and get some, there's so much great jobs out there. Like the amount of placement that's happening right now, if you have SRE skill, is really good. So I'm imploring you, please give it a shot, take a look at it. This is a good time to go. And of course, if anyone asks, it's like, well, you can go find plenty of people who want to talk about it. So where do you want to go next to learn this skill? Well, there's a couple places. First of all, Cloud Native Compute Foundation has some excellent certification and training about running Kubernetes. I recommend it. My company, DataStax, all our engineers go through their certification training, and it's just really top notch. But it gives you that basis to work with. The other one that is almost hilariously basic now and very obvious, but YouTube has such great resources out there, and like Tech World with Nana, and if you're looking for particular skills in different areas, there is a lot of really good free training out there on YouTube. I use it for everything now. I mean, I don't try to work on my car now without looking at YouTube first, but these are really good resources for you. And then, of course, shameless plug, Data on Kubernetes community. Get involved, because there's a large group of people here that want to help you and want to get involved with whatever you're doing, and just ask questions and learn from people that are doing it, or help someone who wants to learn how to do this. If you have knowledge, share it. And that's a part of being the community. So I hope in this very short talk that I gave you some ideas and some inspiration to go out and take a hard look at this. If you're a DBA, it's time to get moving to the next thing. And I hope that next thing for you is an SRE. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Patrick. Absolutely phenomenal. Wouldn't expect anything less.